Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Jamila Wignot, the director of the four-part HBO documentary series STAX, Soulsville, USA. The series focuses a vivid and colorful lens on Stax Records, the iconic and influential Memphis-based label and soul music pioneer that launched the careers of Otis Redding, Isaac Hayes, Booker T and the MGs, Sam and Dave, and many others. It blends interviews with the surviving players and archival footage from the Stax heyday. So, Jamila, as a white dude, I have to admit that I was a Stax ignoramus going into watching your doc. It provided such a vivid and enriching education. Were you aiming it at devotees or people like me?
I think a mix of both. I think the goal with this kind of film, which is very challenging because, music fanatics can be, exceptionally particular about what they want their most favorite label or music doc to cover. But I think the goal is always to try to satisfy the folks who are already kind of deeply in the know and hopefully provide them with new insights while also creating something that's accessible enough that somebody who doesn't know anything can be along for the ride and enjoy the journey. So somehow hitting that sweet spot is always my intention. I think we were able to do that with this
You
one.
did. No, no, it was really impressively done, in fact, because you're right. The aficionados are going to, say, "Oh my God, they're insulting my intelligence." Everyone knows that, but not everyone knows these things. Especially for something that's, that started more than 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe one of the reasons I wasn't much familiar with Stax before watching this was how underappreciated it was at the time by the music industry and the music press. Obviously, less so now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the other thing about Stax was that it's likely you didn't know of the label, but you definitely knew of the songs, which grew in popularity and familiarity long after the label had shuttered. I think also you knew of the artists. And intriguingly, I think that's just part of Stax maybe naivete, or you might just say their kind of particular perspective that I think Jim Stewart and also Al Bell were, and Estelle Axton were very much kind of artists first. They weren't out there trying to make sure that the label was perhaps better known than the artists. And I think that that's why you might know an Otis Redding, but you wouldn't have necessarily known that he was, from Stax. Whereas with the Supremes, you always know it's Motown.
Right. That's the thing is we all knew so much about Motown and so little about Stax. And I just imagine that Motown was really good at marketing itself and marketing its name and its image. And Stax not so much, but Motown, of course, survived so much longer.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
did you have any significant personal interest in Stax before getting the assignment to direct the doc?
I did. I did. I am one of those lucky people who came of age in the late 90s. And so that was at the time that the kind of CD revolution was happening. And a lot of these vintage labels were starting to put out um, remastered collections. And so, as I've been saying all over the place, it was my high school boyfriend actually who kind of introduced me to Otis Redding. He used to make me these little mixtapes, and then later I started collecting my own, compilations of soul DVDs and things like that. But I am not now, and I wasn't then kind of like a deep cuts, crate digging person. I sort of just liked what I liked and liked a lot of this music. So initially, my interest was really selfishly that I was going to get to spend a considerable amount of time steeping myself back in this music in a kind of like really serious, heavily researched way. And then, maybe I was going to get to meet some of the surviving artists, which I did. So it really came through the music first. And then as I dug deeper into the research, I discovered, I think, alongside a lot of the people who will watch this series, that the story is so much a kind of parable of the American story, American history, social movements. So that was really wonderful to know that we had this really big canvas to tell a kind of full story of a label, and that label story as a microcosm of a kind of larger national story.
It's hard to believe that Jim Stewart was still around for you to be interviewed. I guess he passed late in 2022, right?
That's right. I think he was 91 when we sat with him, and that like beautiful sparkle in his eye, and a real kind of, not every single memory was there and fresh, but there was a real kind of incredible, there were some memories that were very fixed for him, and that was really remarkable to see just how much just his sheer love and still kind of, incredibly humble but good natured, and a kind of gratitude that he had for having been able to have the life that he did, even though, there was a lot of upset and tragedy in it. Just at the end, feeling like, as he said, he, unlike most people, got to get up every Monday morning and go to work at a place he loved. And that was just like one of many special interviews I was able to do for the series.
It's really, he showed a lot of courage at the time to be such a colorblind kind of desegregation pioneer, as a white guy in the Jim Crow era South in Memphis, that had to buck so much discrimination at the time leading up to and during the civil rights movement. Um, uh, did he talk to you a lot about that specifically?
I think yes and no. I mean, I think part of the interesting thing about STAX is that they are 100% transgressing very fixed laws about, how you can and can't interact with each other across racial lines, but they're actually doing it in a Black space. And I think there's something very profound to think about there that, had Jim's studio been in downtown Memphis, the likelihood that you would have had as much kind of crossing and transgression wouldn't have been possible. But because the label was in a Black community, because the Black community didn't have the kind of same, we're not interested in upholding those kind of rigid laws. There was a kind of permission that could happen because of spatial relations, and it's happening out of sight of the larger white power structure. So I think if you ran the experiment in a different setting, it wouldn't have come out the same way. But that by no means undercuts Jim and Estelle's, as you say, a real kind of, they're very in the vanguard in terms of how they were working with people and the kind of opportunities that they were creating, and a real kind of openness to that community.
There's something seemingly magical about just this name and this label today, Jamila. I mean, that makes it resonate so powerfully with music fans. Even today, just the name seems to get their motor running, despite it having gone under nearly 50 years ago. Is it just the richness and timelessness of the music and the artists? I mean, Otis Redding, all you have to do is mention his name and people, still feel his death, seemingly, even though it was decades ago, still feel it personally and in a raw way now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think there's just something about, because it was the lesser known of, in this case, the Motowns, or even, Atlantics, it almost it's like a badge of coolness that what STAX is, and it has that quality to it. I'm thinking of, in Jim Jarmusch's Only Lovers, there's a moment where she comes up to Detroit and the Tom Hiddleston character says, "Oh, you want to swing by, Motown and check out Hitsville?" And she says, "Oh no, I've always been more of a Stax girl." And it's like the Tilda Swinton character says that. I think that really epitomizes some kind of like, she's so cool. And I think Stax fans very much claim that for themselves. Musically, I think it's a really, in spite of the fact that they were working with this one house band, they had such a range of kinds of singers that passed through their doors. So like Otis Redding is not like Sam and Dave, is not like Booker T and the MGs, is not like Carla Thomas, is not like Albert King. And I think there's just this like incredible diversity of sound that came out of that place. So for those that discover the label later on, I mean, I'm particularly thinking about the way that the sound has really, that the DNA of that sound is really in a lot of like hip hop music that we listen to today. I think it's just because there's such a unique, there's a unique quality there that can be sampled and repurposed and made anew. So I think that's also some of the draw.
It's true, though. I have no badge of coolness myself, so this is probably part of the reason I didn't know nearly as much about STAX as I should have. But you're right. There is quite a diversity of sound in a way that wasn't the case, say, with Motown, where there really was such a, I mean, as rich and wonderful as the music was for Motown, there was a similarity. And but you're right, there was so much going on with so much different to hear uh, in STAX. In your series, I mean, it provides such a vibrant time capsule. I mean, even just the, you got so many great little snippets of people driving around and showing what it looked like around Memphis at the time, and it really builds the mood. What new revelations did do you think your series supplies, or maybe misinformation that it adjusts?
I think a couple things. One revelation for me, being a Sam and Dave fan, was to know the roots of Soul Man, which is such a wildly popular song, made even more popular by obviously, being used in the Blues Brothers
Right.
films, and later, the Blues Brothers going on tour in their own right. So understanding the kind of real politics that song came out of, that it was really a moment of Isaac Hayes and David Porter looking around largely at the US and seeing what was happening with all the rebellions that were going on at that time, and really feeling like they wanted to say something, and seeing a kind of moment of kind of self-pride and dignity and those kinds of ideas, and then creating this like really fun song that no doubt like still has, in spite of the fact that you wouldn't know it was tied to those things, it has a very deep meaning. And being able to reconnect the original intent of that song with, what I think was lost was really, I mean, I just remember being floored by that, because again, I just thought it was like a fun song to dance to.
So did I. I didn't
Yeah,
realize
right.
any of that history.
Yeah. And so that was really great. And then I think the other part of it is the series was able to, I think, shift perspective to really look at what, if you know the label story, people consider sort of like the part two, Stax 2.0, which is the moment after 68, when the label has to rebuild itself really from the ashes, because they've been gutted in kind of every possible way that you can imagine, losing their star artist in Otis Redding, losing the potential of a second backing band in the Young Barkays, and then losing their entire catalog, alongside the kind of big social catastrophe really of losing, MLK, the kind of leader of the modern civil rights movement at that time. So to be in that low point and to have been able to kind of rebuild something so totally is one thing, but then to do it in a way that, with Isaac Hayes and his hot buttered soul, a new, really expansive, groundbreaking sound that then signals to the record industry writ large, not only are people willing to listen to 18-minute songs, we don't have to stick to the like 2-minute pop song, but also changing the way people thought about the Black music market. That Black people were willing to buy albums if there was an album, that kind of fed them in the way that it does. And so the idea that Stax opens up the door by signaling to the music industry that there is a marketplace here. And then all the incredible sound that comes out of that, the staple singers, the dramatics, being able to highlight the second chapter, which I think is very kind of under-examined and underappreciated, was the other thing that I really am excited about, because we could do it as a series and not a feature.
Did you go in believe thinking of a four-part series, or did it kind of evolve as you were going?
Yeah, we were trying to, it was like 4, 6, trying to find what that sweet spot might be. But yeah, we always knew that it would absolutely be longer than a feature. Just even the kind of early ideas required that. But to know that we could spend as much time as we did on the second half, that we could sort of cleave the series in two, was that there was enough material and great storytelling to do that, was so great. And then I would say the other big thing was, I knew what Wattstax was, and it's kind of blown my mind now, getting messages from friends and even people in the documentary community who like hadn't seen that phenomenal, document of the 1970s, but I didn't know about the kind of the kind of mission behind the scenes on the part of STAX to say we need people behind the camera as well as in front of the camera. Like, and that is something we are still like having diversity committees about and talking
So
about this
true.
kind of lag. And so to see how much they were also in the vanguard of kind of trying to shape, who has the power to make and create images, who has the power to create and control businesses, all of that was really, kind of like the story was, again, as I said, was just so much bigger than, sitting on the dock of the bay.
I know that it was, financial issues, obviously, that doomed the label, but is it, would it be simplistic to say that the white establishment sort of couldn't handle Stack's creative power and independence and success? I mean, does that really play into it?
I, I never know quite how to answer that question. And I think it's out of my own, like, just deep sadness at that idea of gunning for an entity simply because the people behind it don't look like you. As old as I am and all I've lived through, it's still hard to kind of accept that truth. I think that's obviously absolutely at play in Memphis. I think from the music industry standpoint, it is really the nature of the way that business in the United States works. And the idea that if you are a small company and you come up with something great, as Al Bell tells us in the story, somebody is going to come and try to buy you, copy you, or break you. And I think that's just kind of how it is. It's it can be an incredibly vicious enterprise. And I think because of the vulnerability of people of color and marginalized people in this country, you build something up and you don't have the same kind of infrastructure, apparatus, economic ties, whatever it is, for Al Bell to want to be a CBS or an RCA or an ABC is an incredible dream, but he's and he's doing it. I mean, he's competing on the one sense in terms of the product he's able to create, but he just doesn't have the mechanisms as a small independent label to kind of maintain that, and to maintain that while trying to fend off people who want to come in and poach you, copy you, break you. So again, another way that I think that story is something we continue to read. Those ideas and themes are things we continue to examine right now in this moment.
History keeps repeating itself. It's true.
Yeah.
You seem to have a lot of freedom, though, Jamila, in putting this Soulsville, USA together. I mean, I love being able to see the interviews with people who are there and then see them in the archival footage. It's like you're living through the history with them together.
Yeah.
That was obviously a prime creative choice for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking a lot about that lately because it's just what I love. I think, when you're watching a verite documentary, you are really like watching people. It's a bit more voyeuristic, I guess I would say, in a positive sense. You're like watching people in real time experience something. But I think when you're doing historical documentaries that have lots of archive, the real goal, if you can do it, is to make it feel alive again and to feel like you are inside the bodies and points of view and perspectives of the various people you're talking to. And I love that. I mean, I've loved that since I started watching, great documentary series. And so that feeling of being able to be teleported back in time, but to feel like you are in it with, Booker T as he walks through the door of a studio and for the first time gets to play on a record, like to really be as much as you can in his like 14-year-old self, his innocence, his excitement, his enthusiasm. I really love to be able to do that. And I think I'm so grateful that this series was with HBO and we had the resources and budgets to be able to do that, to gather up all this archive, to be able to work as collaboratively as we did with the various labels who, generously opened up their catalogs to us, but also did not dictate to us how we had to use that catalog. It was really and truly mine and the team's choice, of how we would tell this story. So it's like one of those magical and really wonderful things to be able to as you say, have the freedom to kind of approach the story the way we wanted to.
Booker T really looks great too.
Oh my God.
It was like, wow.
I'm going to say that guy is a vegetarian. So I don't know, for the meat eaters, and I am one of them, maybe we need to
Oh, I know. He's ageless. Whatever he's doing, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, And just to mention before we break here, Jamila, I also loved your Alvin Ailey documentary, which previous to STAX, which has a similar kind of vibe in terms of, of being immersive and alive in the same way.
Yeah, thank you. That was another like really special series, film rather. And it's these films are always challenging. They're really hard. And you want to do justice to them. But once they're finished and you can kind of step back, you really do get to think like, God damn, I got to make, I got to do this. This was my job.
You're doing some great stuff, really great
Thank you.
stuff. And I think we're going to leave things there. The four-part STAX, Soulsville, USA, streams over Max. Jamila Wignot, best of luck this Emmy season, and thanks for joining us at Gold Derby.
Thank you so much, Ray.